Detention Board of Managers meeting for Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. I would like to announce that there was an executive session that occurred yesterday evening to discuss personnel matters and litigation. Next item on the agenda calls for public comment. I would like to welcome anyone at this point who would like to submit public comment on agenda items only. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting for open public comment. Are there any public comments? Okay. Seeing none, I will look for a motion for approval of minutes.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right, next item on the agenda calls for our reports. First item A, we have a monthly detained youth report and juvenile court and probation services.
Good evening, Dr. Taylor.
Ms. Mateo joining us virtually. Ms. DiMatteo?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. So for the current youth in secure detention, we have one male at Abraxas Morgantown. We have two males at George Jr. All three of those youth are direct files. And we have one at Adelphi and one at Chester County. Both are regular juvenile cases. And then we have three males in the jail on the juvenile ward and one female at the SCI on the juvenile ward, all direct files.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. DiMatteo. Next item on the agenda, we have Mr. Nelson Walker here to give a report.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Sean, can you put up the PowerPoint, please? No problem. That's the end of it. At the start, you'll see I have a selfie on it of me. Selfie. So, no worries. You can go to the next one. Next one. Yeah, today's agenda, we're going to review our key accomplishments, list current department projects, list department challenges and opportunities for growth, list our goals and objectives for 2025 and national assessment framework review. At the end of this, Molly Barker and Jason Melke from the National Assessment Center from Impact Solutions, they have 3 slides to present at the tail end of this. You can go to the next one. Our key accomplishments, we were able to secure funding through the OJJDP. We were also able to secure funding through the Annie Casey Foundation. And we want to continue a positive trajectory with community partner relationships building and program development. Those grants were for $425,000 for the OJJDP and $15,000 for Annie and Casey. The OJJDP is for continuum of care, and Annie and Casey is for discretionary funds. As I said before, we want to continue to foster partnerships with Delaware County Social Service and Community Support Departmental Cluster. We've just gone through a process of MSI work, which is multi-systems integration, and we're serving similar kids in most of our processes. And what we don't want to do is overwhelm them, overburden them. We want to treat them with the utmost and care for them in a way where we're putting more on us and less on them, that they can heal, they can get better. We want to continue to address delinquency through a child welfare social lens. A lot of people hear that and really don't understand it, but the reality is I've worked in juvenile detention for 27 years, 30 years now, and what you learn in that field is that you're either going to be a jailer or you're going to be a healer. Some people are jailers, some people are healers. We want to heal people. We want to help people. And it's like the social work mantra. Above all things, we don't want to do any harm as we're providing services and care for the people. And we want to operate in transparency. So we talk about our projects. The first project is community-based detention shelter. We, as the county, we had put out an RFP for people to create a shelter for us. No one applied. So our intent is to create a shelter ourselves and man it ourselves and run it ourselves. And in that way, when other people run a shelter for you, they have turnaway rights. When we're running the shelter, we'll take all comers. And it's our job, because this is our community, this is our home space, to take care of our children. And that's what our intent is to do. So we want to partner with Clock Tower, and partner, I mean by renting or leasing space from them. We want to hire our own staff, do our own training, and put things in place where we can run a shelter for our young people. Project 2 is piloting delinquency prevention programs through the needs-based budget. We're working with programs to do school prevention, to hit kids before they even become involved in the system. We're working with YAP as they do their targeted intervention program. We're working with SCM because they do safe corridors. It's kind of like mentoring, a full guard of watch and help to assist teachers and the school programming throughout the day. So those are two of the programs we're working with. And the one thing that YAP is doing is trying to create a neighborhood resource center, which will be used as a pro-social safe space for young people. And that's something that we want to accomplish. Number 3 is we have to work through our OJDP. We receive the money now. Now we have to act on it. We have to hire a project manager, and we have to roll out the ways that we're going to work. This is in conjunction with what we had done with CCLP. When we did the surveys, we looked what we needed in the community, and we found our spots that we want to address immediately. And we want to do a pilot program in Chester, and we're working with Chichester schools and Chester schools. Number 4 is planning Delco assessment centers with the NAC. Molly will come on at the end of this, and she'll explain how the National Assessment Center is going to work with us to do asset mapping and put the things in place so that one of the issues that came about when we did our surveys were that young people didn't know where to access, didn't know what was available, and really didn't understand pro-social or concerning care that was available in the county. So part of this process with the NAC, as they asset map for us, is to put those things in place and in one area where everyone can access it. You can get the information and find out what's local and what's near you where you can gain help. So that's a process that we're working on through the NAC. Delco Juvenile Restitution Funds, this is something that will come into fruition probably toward the end of 2025. We'll work with the JPO. Danielle DiMatteo currently is building out a process that will be able to create restitution funds for young people through the agencies that she works with and that she now has her kids sent to. The data dashboard through Impact Solutions. It's one thing to know that there are issues going on or that things are occurring, but we need to have the data so we can speak about the outcomes, we can speak about what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and what we can improve on. So as we build out the data dashboard, through our process with the OJJDP grant and Impact Solutions, we'll have that information readily available to us, and we'll also be able to input more. So right now, we don't have a huge collection of data that's accessible, but we want to have that moving forward, and that's what we'll create using that OJJDP grant. And the last thing that we'll be working on is TAPS Academy. It's Teens and Police Academy, and it's in Upper Darby. They do summer camps, they do programming, and they work with young people. And I've gone to the graduation and I've gone to some of the program. It's really powerful to see the kids interacting and interacting positively, and that they're gaining a mutual trust and respect with law enforcement. Any questions on what you've heard so far?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you explain the restitution fund again?
Restitution, currently, when a young person is sent to an agency or somewhere where they have placement, they kind of have some funds that they can use to work with. The JPO is going to work with those agencies to help create that fund that we'll be able to use, because a lot of our young people get out, and what holds them back for a long period of time is they owe money to the courts. They owe money here. And we want to find a way to get past that, get through that, because it's enough if you're impoverished. Like we can't keep pushing people down like that and hold that over them for substantial periods of time. It's something that we have to get past. We have to get through. A lot of people, $45 may be a lifetime of struggle for somebody. They might look at that as $1,000 to somebody else, and it's not fair. And we got to find a way to do it better.
It's a question from the chat, Ms. Townsend.
Mhm.
So my question is really, first of all, kudos to you all for at least collaborating enough to get this idea off the ground and identify partners. What does that mean for the role of this current board, and like how is this other entity or approach governed? Because it seems like the right thing to do. I think we've been looking at the data and we know we need to be on a different path, but I just want to understand if there's been any consideration given to how that is managed, or what's the oversight of the shelter in any relationship, if at all, to this particular board.
Board will have oversight as to see what is going on, how it's practiced, and just how we'll set it up. I think anything that we do so far since I've been in this role, I push it through the board. I let everybody know what our plans are, what we want to do, and kind of ask for direction. I don't want to get away from that. And when you run a shelter, we have to get a license from the state. We'll have oversight from the state, and we'll have oversight. But one of the most important things is that we have to abide by 3,800 regs. And I think it'll be a growing and learning process for the board, but I think it's good to have other eyes on a process to make sure that it runs efficiently.
So my follow-up question may be for Kevin or Carlton or legal counsel. If I remember correctly, this board had a scope and a charge that was directly related to juvenile detention. And I think my question is, has the scope been amended, or is that something that we need to explore as we move forward with endorsing and supporting the decisions? I think it's the right path. I am very supportive. I just want to make sure we have the authority to support it.
Yeah, Shakim, I can give probably less of a legal answer and more of a practice answer as far as I'm concerned. And what I'd say is, to state the obvious, it's in the name, right? The first and foremost reason for this body to have been created is to oversee detention in Delaware County for youth, right? And that is always kind of where it starts, whether that's as it historically was and is no longer, through a facility that's managed, within the county, or through the contracts that we currently have with other providers outside the county. That's where it starts. But Monica, myself, others on this board, we wear multiple hats. And we, as members of county council, we have to look across a wider purview with regards to juveniles and the criminal justice system and where those two things intersect. And through that lens, I personally, and I know my colleagues, share this, we want to tap into the experience and lived experience, the professional experience and expertise that we have within this board to make sure that we're not doing what I think historically has been all too often the case in Delaware County, which is living in a silo. We can't live in a silo. We have to look at how detention exists within the wider context of these various other areas outside of it, human services contracts, what's happening through the probation office, courts, like how all these various departments are working or not working, and making sure that we're finding means to divert and to intercept before a youth gets further along in the hierarchy of the criminal justice system. So through that lens, I want this body to be thinking about these other means to reduce the number of youth who end up in detention, right? And through that lens, I think these are all very important things that we're talking about here. We should not be just with blinders on solely talking about detention. I think that would be a real failure if we do that. So that's not a legal answer, but wearing my, county council person hat and thinking more broadly, that's my answer.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm happy to see us really embracing the real call, which is to prevent, these things from happening in the first place and addressing the root cause. But I know we've had several conversations around this. I just wanted to make sure that I'm updated and in line with the direction that we're going. I think this is absolutely the right thing to do.
For sure. And I think it's a great question. It should be asked intermittently so that people who, might be watching us and asking the same question, that they hear this.
I think we're in good space, and I've said it a couple of times this week. We want to operate in transparency. We want to provide for the young people, because even though we're gathering all this data and we're getting all this information and everything, all those data points are a human being. It's somebody's life. It's somebody's experience. And we have to learn how to empathize, and we have to learn how to address those things appropriately, knowing, and I can tell you, every child I've ever seen go to a juvenile detention facility comes home. If we don't prepare them to come home, they're going to come home anyway. So we have to do things a little differently. Sean, can you go to the next slide?
More question.
Go ahead.
So with the plans for the community-based detention center, just to clarify, we're anticipating that center would cover potentially any youth that is scores for detention?
No.
Okay.
We would get a specific demographic for that.
Okay.
Because it would be shelter care. Shelter care is different than secure detention, because in secure detention, every door is locked. And in shelter care, you are staff secure, meaning we can't restrain you. You can't walk out. We can give you direction and tell you to think about the decisions you're going to make for the long-term implications.
And Nelson, just to further that, I mean, just to be clear, if a youth walks out the door on their own volition, they can do so. No one's restraining them from doing so, but they are in violation of a court order that said that they should stay there. So there's going to be escalating consequences for doing so, right? So it's my understanding of it really is, Nelson just talked about the fact that every youth who's in detention is going to ultimately go home. We want to make sure they're prepared, but it's also the prior, right? Like it's intercepting before a youth escalates to having to go to a secure detention facility, right? Like it's diversion and it's prevention.
Yeah, that's why the key is the community. A healthy community, an involved community, a community with a voice is going to help the young people. and it's going to allow us to grow and foster. So that's our biggest thing. We want to intercept kids before they even encounter the justice system, because all of us know it's an easy in and it's a hard out. So that's our goal. And Kevin, I'm in full agreement with you. The challenges and opportunities. The elephant in the room is the Lima detention facility. When David came here, the immediate goal was probably to rehab and go in. Then it kind of diverted to tear down and rebuild. There were some issues around architecture, pricing. So now that process is kind of at zero. We're still trying to be as fiscally responsible to the county and responsible to the understanding that we know we have to provide appropriate care for young people. And we have an obligation to the community to keep the community safe when crimes are committed. So that is always going to be here. It's something that we will continue to talk about and try to work through and see what will come out of that process. But right now we're not rehabbing and we're not tearing that facility down. Public trust and perception. I think we have to be out in the public, talking to people, getting to know people, having people understand us and want to trust us, because there's no greater gift that any person has than their child. And if we're going to be responsible for people's children, we have to be able to speak to the parents, speak to the people in the community who love them and interact with them. And that's our goal and that's our job. That's what we've been doing. The internal system process. We're new here, I'm new here, so we're trying to learn how to navigate the process. And people have been very good to us, showing us what to do and how to do it. The board of managers, everyone here has taken time with me and our staff at different times to help us get through, help us understand. And those are things that are going to help us, because one thing you learn about working in any kind of congregate care, you have to take care of your staff. Your staff have to be healthy, or unhealthy people or hurt people tend to hurt other people. And we want not to have that as be our case. So next slide. Moving forward, continue to foster and develop community relationships. People in the community know. People in the community understand, and they can help us grow our position and our possibilities. We have to hire a project coordinator for our OJJ DP grant, and that's one of our first goals starting in the month of January. You can send resumes to Savannah Matthews. But that's something that we have to do, because the OJJ DP grant is a 2-year process. But what we hope to put in place through that grant, the continual care that is sustainable over a long period of time and will have long-term effects on the community and our young people. And we have to implement programming. If we build out a shelter, the things that we want to do at Chichester School and in the Chester area, we have to get on the ground to work those things out, and that's what we're going to do. And we're collaborating with the other departments. I had said earlier that we're working in the MSI, the multiple system integration process, with all the other agencies, because we know we have similar kids that are in a similar demographic, and we want to be able to help them. And we don't want to hear after the fact, oh, you know, they were involved in this or they were involved in that, and these people were helping them. We want to form the group so that in that circle, we'll be able to help people. Any questions?
Yeah, so Nelson, just a question, comment, but this is, in the right way, is becoming very complex.
Yes.
And rightly so, and I'm happy that it's becoming complex. One of the things I think, if we could, going into 2025, is to really maybe do some mapping where we can literally, for both the community and for all the stakeholders, show the various places, the buckets where community falls, where voluntary shelter goes, where secured shelter is, so that we can really make sure that we are not losing children in any regards, and then figure out where those gaps might be in order to really move forward. I think that visual for both for this board as well as for the community could be very helpful to continue to move this process forward.
Yeah, and that's part of what will be done through the OJJDP grant.
Great.
So we will have those things because people feel it differently when they see.
On the project coordinator position, is that, so that's going to be a county position?
It's not going to be a county.
Okay, so it's a consulting.
It's, I guess it would be a consulting because we wouldn't give them benefits. It's just a flat rate that we would pay them.
Okay, and that's something that's required for the grant, I guess.
It's required. So now I think, and Molly, if Molly's there,
Yeah, I'm here.
hey, Molly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I think I've got a couple slides. I'm not sure if they're in this slide deck or if I need to share my screen.
They're in the end, Molly. They're in there.
Okay, can you go to the next slide? Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you for having me. Good to see some of you again. I know it's been probably a year since I've been in one of these meetings. So Nelson asked that I come and just provide an update with the work that the National Assessment Center Association is doing there in Delaware County. And I will also kind of tap in Jason here with Impact Solutions and see if you all have questions. So the one thing that I just wanted to kind of give us a little bit more context to is how we got here to this point and considering an assessment center. So Nelson mentioned the CCLP system assessment that was done last year in 2023. One of the main recommendations that came out of that was a structural recommendation. CCLP put recommendations into 3 buckets: structural, policy, and programmatic. One of the main structural recommendations was to utilize an assessment center to focus on case management, referrals to service, and barrier removal. And so that's primarily what the National Assessment Center Association is coming in to help do, is to stand up an assessment center to help facilitate all of those things, but primarily diversion and prevention from the juvenile justice system in general. So there were a couple other recommendations within that report, policy recommendations that really spoke to diversion. So establishing a policy regarding diversion eligibility, and program recommendations really talking about quick connection to community-based services for youth and families, and tracking whether or not that diversion is preventing either initial or further legal system involvement. All of those recommendations really fall underneath what an assessment center can do within a community. So if you go to the next slide, this is a visual that I always think is really helpful in terms of what is an assessment center, what is the framework. So there's over 100 assessment centers across the country. They operate differently depending on the community. They're meant to be adapted to local community context and needs. But generally speaking, when we talk about an assessment center, we're talking about some type of concerning behavior, something that is happening that under the referral source there, so the kind of the second column, if you will, either parents are identifying that behavior, schools, law enforcement, the courts, or child welfare. And the assessment center is really used to divert those kids from further system involvement to an assessment center, where the center's job is solely to really just understand what that child and family's needs are, and what are the community-based services and supports that are available to meet those needs, and help them with navigation, wraparound services, connection. Assessment centers are not service providers, so they're not competing with your service provider community. Their job is to connect. And really, the outcome there is that not only are we getting kids and families access to services and supports, but we're also preventing system involvement. So for us, this next year, and one of the focuses that the NAC is taking through the OJJDP grant, and our work with Delaware County is, again, going back to that second column, those referral sources. In order for us to really make a change and a sustainable change, we have to understand what is currently happening within the community and how young people are moving through the system process, and the key decision points. So it's understanding current practice. The CCLP report did a little bit of this. They really identified who the high referring communities were within Delaware County. Our process is diving a little bit deeper into that. So from the school setting, really understanding how decisions are being made in terms of suspension, expulsion, calling law enforcement, filings with the court, how those decisions are being made, and then what their data is. How many kids are we talking about for what in terms of specific charges or behavior? The same thing with law enforcement. So really talking with law enforcement and the law enforcement officers on how are decisions being made, how many young people are moving through their decision points and pathways. If they do facilitate diversion, how many young people are being diverted from law enforcement? And then specific to Delaware County, you also have MDCs. So, really looking at your municipal courts, your city courts, and looking at how are law enforcement utilizing city courts versus your Court of Common Pleas, and looking at both of those systems to understand who's moving through those decision points in those systems so that we can make a really informed decision on how the assessment center is going to divert and put MOUs and agreements and policy changes in place with those different partners in order to create sustainable change, that it's not kind of all, kind of refer to us, but if we don't really create policy or practice changes to make it equitable, then, and sustainable, then we really run up a lot of, against a lot of challenges in the future. So that's the work that we're doing at this, we call it critical intervention mapping. I think it's on the next slide, but it's really an iterative process for us to understand, again, how are young people moving through the school, law enforcement, municipal, and district level process so that we can really place an assessment center for diversion and prevention in a way that's meaningful and impactful and data informed. And that's what we're working with the local leadership council, with Nelson, with Anne Marie, and with Danielle to implement. The decision, and I think Nelson, you can chime in here too, or add to the leadership council. Really, when we looked at the top referring agencies, law enforcement agencies to the Court of Common Pleas, one of those communities was Chester. We've had several different focus groups or conversations with school districts and law enforcement in a couple different communities. Chester really seemed to be the one that was ready to engage in a pilot process, I would say, and ready to move forward with data gathering. So at this point, I know we're pursuing Chester to really pilot the assessment center and pilot, gathering their data, looking at how the assessment center can serve that community specifically, and then looking at how we can scale that to other communities. So the data points and the process that we're looking at right now is specifically with Chester. The other thing that I would say too, and this is where Jason comes in, the National Assessment Center Association and Impact Solutions are working hand in hand. Impact's role is really to create data dashboards and tools for Delaware County so that you can look at data ongoing, even after this technical support is long gone, that you have the tools to help you moving forward. So Jason, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, but.
Sure, just a few things. I think, central and critical to all of this is also the connective tissue between all of it, which is data, and really what help this flow and help to be informed about everything that Molly just talked through. And then our job, and one of the things that we take a lot of pride in, is how can we build tools that are sustainable so that you can continue to look at this data beyond just a one point in time. And so we're always thinking about how can we help build capacity around using data to inform decision making. So that's where we come in.
Thanks, Jason. Nelson, do you have anything else that you wanted me to cover, or any other context that you would add?
No, I appreciate it. And yes, we have selected Chester as our pilot program for that NAC. So yeah, I appreciate that, Molly. Thanks, Jason.
So quick question before they leave. Molly, in the second slide that you had there, you had the list of concerned of voices, but I didn't see kind of the trusted voices amongst youth. So even though young people are able to work with schools and possibly parents and things like that, there's another factor of people that they trust within the community that they may go to before they go to any of those other folks. And I'm just wondering how we capture some of that, how we get those folks on our team to be more supportive and help that pipeline a little bit quicker.
Well, one thing, like usually you find those people by asking the young folks who are the people they go to, who are that. I ran a program called Community Power where parents could come in to the final program. Well, a lot of kids didn't have any loved ones to come in. So what we would go through is find out who were the trusted other adults in the community that could come in. So I think as we talk to young people and we hear their voice, they'll be able to express to us, who are those people? And we have to ask too, who are those people? So we can find out and we can include them in the process.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's included in the data, because sometimes, you know, we're in this one cycle, you know, the schools and things like that, but that's not the person that they're necessarily talking to when they're getting close to the edge. So just as long as we can add that group to it.
Yeah. And the one thing I would add, and something that Delaware County was really, I would say had a lot of foresight on, was you all have made a priority to make the assessment center community-based, and selecting somebody to operate the assessment center that has trust with the community, putting it in a location where youth and families can easily access it and do trust. All of that is essential to to the success of an assessment center. So I would say, in this planning process, keeping those things at the forefront and really making sure that the community has input, so that when it is operational, there is a level of trust there that when young people and families are struggling, that they feel like they can access and go to the assessment center is critical. It's very important.
Thank you.
That's it.
Any additional questions or comments on the presentation? Thank you for the really thorough update and presentation, and thank you all for joining us virtually to really update us on where we are right now with NAC and the process and kind of all that we have going moving forward. All right, next item on the agenda calls for old business. Is there any old business that anyone wants to touch on? All right, new business. Any new business? All right, hearing none, moving on to our next round of public comment. So for anyone who would like to submit public comment, please step forward now, state your name, municipality, and there is a 3-minute limit, as you can see on the timer in front of you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Nicole Palm, and I live in Middletown Township, which is very close to the former detention center. And I'm raising 3 young people here in Delaware County. Today, I'm here on behalf of Delaware County Coalition for Prison Reform. That's a community-led organization that began back in 2016, and we pushed for the deprivatization of George Hill Correctional Facility. And although the main focus of Delco CPR is George Hill, we are all heavily invested in advocating for the entire Delco legal system, and for one that's grounded in humanity and whose programs and processes are empirically based. So today we want to speak about the potential future of juvenile justice in our county, and I'll echo many of the updates that were discussed tonight, which felt really good. We really do feel heartened by the shifting discussion over the last few years by the Board of Managers. It's gone from one of just, status quo punishment to now we're talking about rehabilitation and community involvement, mental wellness and restorative justice. And we firmly support treating children as children. And that's not to say that children don't have any agency or are to be perceived as less than adults. We believe that young people are highly capable of learning new ways of being and can be active participants in bettering their lives and the lives around them. We must treat each individual with compassion and give people chances to make substantive change. We know it's true that youth who are incarcerated for any length of time face adverse effects. But we do understand that there's a need for some type of secure facility that would house young people who present as a danger to themselves or others. We envision that facility to be very nurturing and therapeutic, and one that employs initiatives that are solidly grounded in trauma-informed research. We have this amazing opportunity here in Delco to create a nationwide model for young people involved in the legal system. I have handed to you a detailed proposal from our group with some of our visions for this. Again, it looks a lot like what Nelson talked about today. We need safe and secure housing for those who need to be removed from the community, but we also need a safe place for any unhoused young person. We do need a family support center like the NAC that talks about how to access services. And we also need an activity center so that there can be recreation for young people, educational support, mental health counseling, and supported peer interactions. And I love you talking about connecting with pre-existing community services so that we can build them up and make sure they're better utilized. One area of concern that I'll say real quick is that all those young people that you mentioned at the beginning that are being housed in adult facilities, we really would like to see them in an appropriate facility with the appropriate care as soon as possible. And I know we all want the same thing, to make our community safer for all residents, including those who find themselves wrapped up in the system.
Are there any additional public comments?
Hello, Tanita Austin, Upper Providence Township. Thank you so much for being here and doing your presentation. I'm thinking of 2 years ago, it was a whole different conversation. So I'm glad that I can be happily surprised when I come to the meeting. I had some questions which I could talk to you later, but I know there are places where this is happening, even Philadelphia, where there's just a house. And I love the idea that they have to be responsible for the choices that they make if they decide, to leave this facility. The clock tower, that is the Glen Mills School, correct? And so that's what you're considering being the shelter. Okay. And I was wondering if anything around like youth courts was being considered in the schools, because I know that has worked in certain areas and they were talking about doing that in Chester.
I've talked to him, so that's something.
Okay. And I think that the critical part is understanding the current systems and who makes these decisions. As we've heard before, that a lot of the diversion could happen, but there's a lot of resistance to diversion. My question also was, what's the consideration for the timeline? I know the budget is for 2 years, but this sounds like this is going to take longer than that. Is there like additional funding coming?
Definitely want to apply for additional funding. But I think if we build it out and undergird it appropriately, that it's not going to take as much to continue as it did to start. So that's what I want to believe. but I think we can create a sustainable thing, and we will continue to apply because everything costs money to run, and we want to run it appropriately.
Okay. And also the last time I was here, there sounded like a commitment to tear down the old facility, but now you're saying that that's not the case.
The difficulty is in that process, we have to ensure that we're either going to do something with the land or prepare it because there's an additional cost
Right.
if we tear it down and don't build immediately on it. So that's the process, the sticking point we're trying to get to.
Okay, but this is going to happen before that decision is made.
What's going to happen?
This process of the,
Yeah, we're running this.
Okay.
We're going.
all right, thank you.
Any additional public comments? All right, seeing none, I will look to board member for board member comments.
Really fast, just because we should. I just wanted to take a moment, since this is the last meeting of the year, to thank everybody who has been involved with this, certainly county council, every member of this board, the community especially, for getting us to where we are. And I just wish everyone a very happy, merry, festive, relaxing holiday season, at least for a week and a half. And then you can get back to work.
And safe.
And safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments from board members? All right, well, thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful holiday season. And thank you for all your work. This was a great update and report on where we are right now and where we're going in the next year. So thank you, everyone. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Everyone have a wonderful holiday.
You as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone else.